What is up, Ham Radio? Kilo Echo 8, Papa Zoo November, the Ham Radio Adventure Guy. Thanks for stopping by, your one stop for everything Adventure Radio. It is Hump Day. That means it's time for the Hump Day Happy Hour. Got a great show tonight. Listen to Discords, my email, everything's been blowing up about these Pota award changes. And I'll tell you, I'm tired of answering questions, so I figured I'd bring somebody out that can answer them a lot better than I can. So we're going to do a stream tonight. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to my latest Patreons. These guys rock. They help keep me going to the Pota parks and doing all my adventures and stuff like that. So shout out to you guys. I appreciate everything you do for me. And also want to give a shout out to the newest Adventure Club standings. A lot of offline donations. Bruce has moved up to the top again. Kent and David Davenport with off-stream donations, as well as Toby as well. So a lot of shifting going on there. But I'm not going to waste no time. I'm going to bring these guys out. But I do want to say this. Let Vance get his talk out, and maybe he'll answer your questions before you even have to ask him. So let's save the questions for him to get this talk out. All right, let's bring out Hayden and Vance. What is going on, guys?
Oh, not much. I'm having an awesome week. I got to make a bunch of people angry, and so that I just revel in infuriating people for no apparent reason. No, I'm just kidding.
well, listen. See, that affects me when you do that because I've been named the Pota King, and when the kingdom is unhappy, who do they come to? They come to the king, and somebody's heads are going to roll if you don't get some people straightened out here. So.
We don't need the king overthrown.
Oh yeah, we don't need that for sure. So I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you talk about the changes and everything, and maybe nobody will even ask a question.
Well, even if they don't ask the questions, I know by now. The last couple of days, all the excitement. I'm pretty familiar with the questions that they'd likely ask. So even if we don't get any questions, I can probably answer them anyway.
Yeah, well, we better be on best behavior since the boss is in the chat, huh?
Yeah, I saw there. Say, Jason. Hopefully, he'll keep us in line too. If I misspeak on anything, we can appoint Jason the designated live editor if I say something wrong. So yeah, I don't know. Do you guys want me to just kind of jump into some stuff, or do you have anything you want to hit on first? Or
I'm going to let you go ahead and do the spiel, and then we'll see where it goes from there. You might answer everybody's questions. I don't have a lot of questions myself because my big thing is, and I feel like a lot of people's big thing, and they don't even realize it, is they're worried they can't hunt or activate the 2 times, right there as the UTC clicks over, and UTC is UTC. Pota can't change that. Nobody can. So, I mean, you can still do that. It's just the award status. And I think a lot of people's not getting that. But I'm going to let you go ahead and cover everything, and we'll see where it goes.
Sure. Well, and I'll actually talk first to the first one that changed, which was the radar rover stuff. So before I talk to the change, I'm going to do I'll try to keep it real short, like a 45-second history lesson on radar. So radar was technically not actually Pota's program. Radar wasn't an award scheme that existed prior to Pota even. And as Pota got started, Jason had some conversations with, I believe Eddie is the gentleman's name that ran the actual radar program. And basically between the two of them, they said hey, it would be cool if we did something joint together where if people happened to do radar in Pota parks, Pota could give them a radar certificate for doing radar within a park. Over the years, a lot of people, that information kind of got lost, or people didn't realize that radar wasn't actually Pota's thing. It was a joint venture with Eddie from South Africa. And some developer guy, I don't know who, I'll kind of look around and pretend like I don't know who it was. Basically, I had to figure out how to collect the information so that we could essentially gather the data that was needed to be able to do radar certificates within Pota. The whole focus of radar is movement. It's the idea of make 5 contacts, move a certain distance, make 5 contacts, move a certain distance. So that's what radar was focused around. Pota, obviously, we don't actually collect data like GPS coordinates of where you made each QSO. So we don't actually have a way of knowing how far you moved between QSOs. And so we came up with that complicated form that everybody loved. And I'll take the blame for that. That was my design. That was my like, how do I collect this information that we don't collect so that we can issue this certificate? But we figured it out. We made it work. And it was a lot of fun. But because it was a little bit complicated to apply for, it was actually only about 1% of our users actually applied for those radar certificates. And the people that did apply for them didn't focus as much on the movement distance as switching between parks. So technically, the way radar was designed, if you were on foot, you could start at your local trailhead on the Appalachian Trail, make 5 contacts, hike the required distance, make 5 contacts, hike the required distance. So technically you could do it all within one park. But very few people actually applied for radar that way. Most people did it from their cars, moving from park to park to park. So that's kind of the history of where radar came from and how our users tended to apply for it. So then fast forward to, more recently in the last couple years, we launched the new Pota.app website. We moved over like practically everything except for the radar application because it was very complex and it basically had to get rebuilt. It wasn't like something that you could port. So as we were talking about moving the radar application over and looking at the data for how many people actually applied for it and things like that, eventually the administration team came to the decision where we said, hey, this really doesn't quite fit in the new system. It relies on data we don't collect. Maybe it's time that we design something that fits how the Pota operators tend to operate and just do an award based on activating unique numbers of parks. The idea of roving, grid squares for grid folks are familiar with that. People who participate in the SYP events are familiar with roving, like moves from park to park. So we made the decision to do that. The original plan was that we were going to announce that we were going to do that. See, this is almost November. We were going to make the announcement about that essentially now and announce that, hey, at the end of December, this change is going to happen. So apply for your radars now, because at the end of December, we're going to shut them off. That was the game plan. Unfortunately, Fate had different plans for us, and Fate crashed the old website, which we were keeping running on like a shoestring just for the radar applications. And so when the old website went down, we essentially had to make the decision like, okay, well, now our hands are forced. Do we bring the old website back up just for radar and spend a lot of hours and a lot of time and a lot of effort and potentially money to get the old website fixed just for that one thing? Or do we just rip off the Band-Aid and announce it now and make it happen? And that's ultimately what we did, is we said, hey, it's not the timing we initially planned for, but, again, Murphy had other plans. So off came the Band-Aid. We just didn't turn the old radar back on. And I did scrambling over, the course of a week to get the new rover up and running so that we could at least have it out there as a replacement quickly. So that's essentially what happened with rover. On Twitter, somebody did ping me with a question. The only question that I've seen somewhat regularly around the new rover awards was, if somebody does a rove and hits like 15 parks, do they get 5, 10, and 15 certificates, or do they just get like the 15? So the way it's set up, you basically get one award per the day. So if you do 15, you get 15. If you do 20, you get the 20. If you do 5, you get the 5. So it's not, they don't like stack up. So if you're an insane person, like, I don't know, like, the guys down in Florida, like Bill that likes to rove, and like James up in Canada that did his big giant rove. If you're a crazy person like that, you wouldn't get 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 all for one day. You'd just get whatever the top one is that you got to. So that's that one. And then the other question that comes up around those is like 2-fers, 3-fers. Those do count. So if you are able to get a 2-fer or a 3-fer in the mix, that's kind of like a multiplier essentially, so that you can get a few more parks in the count. And that's actually part of why when we transferred to, if you remember the old radar, it actually started at, I think, 2 or 3 moves. The new one we specifically set at 5 moves because we're pretty sure that 5-fers is the most that exists anywhere. I think there's like one in Colorado where like 4 trails cross each other in a park. So you can like go to the state park and stand at the intersection of trails. And there's another one of those somewhere else. So we said, hey, since there is such a thing as a 5-fer in like 2 places, let's make the awards start there so that you have to at least go to the effort, of that to go up. Just with the number of 2-fers and 3-fers that are out there, it didn't make sense to start the rover at 2 or 3 like the radar did. So that's rover. That's the scoop there. I don't know if there's any questions that were flying in while I was talking rover before we talk late shift.
The other 5-fer is in DC.
DC, yeah. I guess I should have known that.
So essentially, you can get your first rover certificate, the new one, by going to this park in DC that's a 5-fer.
Yep. Yeah. Or Colorado.
Okay. That's a good way to start out.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy knows where the one in Colorado is. I'm not familiar with the exact location of either of them, but I know one's near Jeremy and one's near Jason, because every time we talk about X-fers, then we say, well, there are those couple 5-fers. How does that factor into the mix?
so for me, this change is definitely exciting because I had all the radars for one, and I was stuck at I couldn't do no more. Now I've got a 20 and 25 and a 30. One change is I didn't hear you mention though, but where before it was 24 hours. Now it's based on the UTC day, correct?
Yes, now it is based on in the UTC day, like the vast majority of our stuff is. Yep. So crab soccer.
So that the only complaint that I've heard, I haven't seen them in the chat yet, but I do know there were some people who recently went on a trip to their daughter's wedding and stuff, and they had did a rove and they got back and they didn't get to apply for their radar before this happened, and it makes sense now because I was wondering why you guys didn't give like a couple weeks notice, say, hey, get your radars in. But that makes sense. It's the site crash, so you covered that. That's the only complaint I've heard on that one myself.
Yeah, and that depending on the exact details, I don't know what their actual rove was and what parks they went to and how they did it. But if they did what most people do and just moved between parks and went to 5 different parks or 10 different parks, they would still get the new certificate automatically for that. The catch would be if they did one of the like intermediate numbers that doesn't exist now. So like if they did 7, they would get the 5, or if they did 13, they'd get the 10. So I don't know their exact scenario. Right. What I would tell people, because it was kind of abrupt and unplanned because of the crash with the old site, I would say shoot a note into the help desk, and Charlie, who kind of is the initial gatekeeper of the tickets, he would forward it to me. I could go look at the data and see, kind of what the scoop was, and we could figure out something to work with those folks if there was some kind of one-off situation. But for the most part, most folks, even if they didn't get to apply, they would still get the new award because the new one was set up retroactively. So anything people did in the past, they'll get rover credit for. So if they, like I said, if they got to 5, 10, 15 parks, they'll get those. It would just be kind of if they did one of those in between ones that doesn't exist anymore. So
Good deal. Good deal. And then look there, the boss man's even going to help out, he says.
yep.
All right, so I guess now it's time for me to start eating popcorn, and we're going to move on to the next change. Let's hope you answer everything, and I have an easy job tonight.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, it's not an easy topic. It's, I'll be the first to admit it is a little bit complex. But I'll step back. I'll get to that in a second. So again, it probably helps to start with a little bit of history. The intent with late shift was always to be a certificate for operating late. Even look at the certificate. It's stars and a night sky. Like the intent was always that it be a certificate for late night activity. But when we first set it up, the program was very US centric. So for simplicity, we just said, hey, between 00 UTC and 12 UTC is essentially like overnight in the US for the most part. So that's how late shift initially got set up. As we started to become an international program, that started to make less and less sense. And it was even within the US, it was fairly East Coast centric, because with the old late shift, late, when you were in standard time and not daylight savings time, late for like, Oregon and Alaska and stuff, late was at like 4 p.m. So you could be like, having your afternoon tea and biscuits and be getting a late shift credit, which obviously really wasn't the intent. So the intent was always that it be a late thing. And as we started expanding internationally, it just got more and more ridiculous. People actually, all the hubbub recently, one of the activators from the Netherlands was like, yeah, this was the old late shift in the Netherlands. And it's like him like in the middle of the afternoon in the park and people walking their dogs. And so it made all the sense in the world to try to change the award so that it was based on late wherever you happened to be activating or late at the park you were hunting. So that was the original intent. The piece that kind of convoluted and made it even more confusing is because in the US, late at night just happens to coincide with the UTC change. People ended up kind of confusing the idea of late shift with the start of a new day. They were really two separate things that just happened to land at the same time. So the UTC rollover for when a new activation starts and late shift in our system were two separate things that just happened to land at the same time. So as we started talking about redefining late shift so that it was actually late at the park, the first bit of confusion was people thinking that meant we were changing when a new day starts, which is not the case. So UTC is UTC. You roll over from 11:59 or 23:59:59 to 00. You start a fresh activation. That's all the same. This late shift window time zone stuff that is admittedly confusing is only for the time box where we count QSOs for these specific late shift and the new companion early shift. So that's kind of the first bit of history background clarification, is that these shift windows don't have anything to do with the UTC day. So moving forward, once we decided we had to define like how do we change like the time, like at what time is late wherever somebody is, and that gets hard. The simplistic part of all of us, I won't say simplistic, that sounds mean, but what feels like the most logical thing to all of us is to say, well, we're all in time zones, so base it off a time zone. And even our internal conversations, we essentially said, well, yeah, let's do it by time zone. But time zones are wildly more complicated than people realize. And by way of example, I say, think about like your computer, when you set up a new phone, when you set up a new tablet, anytime you set up a new device, you have to tell it what time zone you're in, because time zones are politically motivated and driven. There's no logic to them. So a computer can't figure out what time zone something is unless somebody tells it, which means for us to go to by time zones, we would either have to go back through all 30,000 parks in the system and put what time zone it's in, or we would have to tell you as the user, hey, you have to put the time zone that you were in when you made that contact in your log for every contact. And we went, well, whatever we want to do, we want to be able to base it on data we already collect. We don't want to put any extra burden on our users to figure out what late is. So one of the developers was the one who said, hey, in practice, time zones essentially change every 15 degrees of longitude. In theory, I'll actually pull up a map in a little bit and show something. But so we said, hey, rather than figure out all the complicated time zone stuff, we can literally put, instead of doing all the complicated time zone database, storing information, collecting it, we can literally use the park pin that we already have and say, well, if we take, if we say 20 UTC is late shift start for Greenwich Mean Time, which is where everything in UTC starts, we can just say 20 minus the longitude divided by 15, which counts bloop, 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 how far away you are, essentially equals the UTC start time of late for that park. And we do round it. So we round that to the nearest hour. So that's why we did those 15-degree chunks, is so that a formula can figure it out. Now, we realize that describing a formula is kind of confusing when you announce something. And part of what made the confusion worse is in trying to simplify the description of it, we shared some stuff that might have actually made it worse instead of helping. So we tried to give people, hey, the rough idea is that it generally follows time zones, but time zones are wacky. And if you look in our announcement, it even says that, like, due to the, jogging and whatever, I forget how we worded it, but we kind of put right in there, because time zones are wild, local times might vary, but this will work out to roughly 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. or roughly 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. But that obviously doesn't take into account the weird, wild time zone stuff does. That's just the straight 15. So essentially it turns into a simple formula to figure it out for everybody is a complex thing to explain, because it's not tied to something that we as like human beings have experience with. We're used to talking in time zones, but time zones are made up political boundaries basically. So I can, if I have, I don't know if you gave me permission to share or not, I'll try.
You put it in there and we'll get it up there one way or another.
Cool.
All right.
So again, this is just a visual representation. This isn't meant to be like the Bible, but this gives a visual context for how that formula falls. So essentially, if a park lands in this gray stripe, its late shift starts at 20 UTC. Its early shift starts at 2 UTC. Because we do the even 15-degree chunks with the rounding, that is basically how these lines end up where they are, the gray and blue. So, 21, 22, 23. So if the parks land in these stripes, that's when late starts for that park. And this is where I like to give the example of where time zones are wildly more complex than people use. Because even here in the US, what we call Eastern time zone kind of goes way out into what would be like Central, if you follow the 15. Because if you look across the top, you can see all the time zones actually start in those 15-degree chunks, and then the lines just like go squiggly because of political reasons, not any like logical reason. So that's why time zones are messy. And then especially, you look in the Pacific, around the Pacific Islands, and then there are some countries, India as a country basically says, screw the time zones, we're going to split the difference, and the whole country is going to go 5.5 hours off. So like they're not even an even hour off from what would be considered standard. So it's, we understand it's a little complex, but from a being able to issue the awards without adding any extra logging requirements to our users, this is the simplest way to code for it. And then the other thing that we did yesterday is on the actual park pages, and I'll actually just pop one up as an example. That a real park? On the actual park pages, we also just added the same calculation for everybody. So if you're going to a park, you can just look at the park page and see, okay, early shift starts at 10 UTC, late shift starts at 4 UTC. So we added that information for every park so that people don't have to like look at the longitude and do the formula or try to figure it out from the map. They can just look it up right there. So, that's the technical stuff. I'll be the first to admit it's confusing, and I can say it's confusing because I was writing some of the formulas into the SQL. So we had to basically figure out like what's the easiest way to code for this like wildly complex topic to try to make it the same around the world. So but yeah, so what's the question here that popped up? Hey, Chef. Okay,
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, so on a P2P, so the trick with a P2P is you are both an activator and a hunter for that
Correct.
QSO. So that QSO would count towards, now let's see who's in which. I'm in Michigan and Andy's in the UK. So Brian, you in Michigan as the activator, you would get one count, quote unquote. You would get one count towards your late shift activator because it's based off of, all of our stuff ultimately is based off of activator logs. So you would get one count for late shift activator based on what's in your log, and you would get one count for early shift hunter based on what was in Andy's log, because
and that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So essentially you do get like a credit, quote unquote, towards both, but one is as the activator and one is as the hunter. So
and it would be reciprocal for Andy.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be just flipped. Yep. So, and the other question that came up a lot, we did put this in our description, but I think a lot of people got hung up on the formula at first and didn't read through all the stuff. The other question that was popping up was, hey, if I'm at the North Country Trail, which crosses like 12 states, I think the pin for the North Country Trail is in like Wyoming, but technically I could activate that trail in Pennsylvania. So we do have the logic baked in that if the trail crosses multiple states, it goes by the center of the state you're in instead of the pin for the park. So if I do the North Country Trail in Pennsylvania, the time is based off of the center of Pennsylvania instead of the pin that's out in Wyoming. So that's the other question that was coming up somewhat regularly in all of the excitement. So
that's pretty good because Curtis actually asked that in the chat just then.
Okay, cool.
So you were on the ball with that one.
But yeah, so I don't know. I mean,
so
if the chat is firing away with questions, there's my description might not have clarified a lot of things, but it kind of gives the details. But if folks have specific questions, a lot of times it helps to answer a specific question because that makes it kind of like real for the person. So yeah, chat, what do you got? Hit me up.
Well, you answered a big question for me earlier before we started the stream. In the description for the rules of late shift and early shift, it said 8 p.m. local time was the start of late shift, 4 p.m. Pacific was the start of early shift, and 5 p.m. Pacific was the start of early shift. But then it went on to say, if you want to do early shift, And then I checked at my home park, and it was actually 1 UTC or 9 p.m. here. And I didn't even think about daylight savings time. So I just wanted to point out, this is a good resource that you have up here on the screen right now. It tells you when early shift and late shift starts.
Yep.
Regardless of whether it's daylight savings time or not.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a good catch. And that's why it's so complicated. Like, we tried to use that 8 to 2 and 2 to 8 as a rough guideline to help people understand it a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it doesn't translate because part of what we call Eastern time zone falls in mountain by the 15-degree chunks. Technically, if you're in the Eastern time zone, late, depending on that and whether you're daylight savings time or not, late could land anywhere between 7 and 10 local time. So that's why we try to say, hey, this 8 to 2, 2 to 8 is like a rough guideline, just so you know. But go to the park page and check. We did the math for you there to try to take some of the confusion away. So that's Curtis, that's a good question.
That's a great question.
So technically, yes, there would be some places where you could maybe be in a twofer with different late shift times. The scenario would have to be if you were at a park that was like, if you're in, now Pennsylvania is a bad example for this, but I'll say it anyway. If one of those 15-degree lines happened to land towards like the western end of Pennsylvania, and you were doing a twofer on like the North Country Trail and a local park, the local park would be just to the left of the line, but the North Country Trail would say, hey, well, I definitely don't want to use Wyoming, so I'll use the center of Pennsylvania. But if you're right at the edge of one of those lines, the center of Pennsylvania, in theory, could be on the other side of the line. I mean, those are kind of edge cases, but yeah, I mean, technically it is possible. I have no idea if there are actually any of those out there. If there are, somebody will find it, I'm sure.
Curtis says he's thinking Nebraska and the further out west with tons of trails.
Yeah, it would have to be somewhere where there's states big enough to cross multiple chunks of longitude that also have a long trail that runs through them. Yeah, like the Oregon Trail. I'd say any of the states out west that the Oregon Trail goes through could have that scenario. But yeah, I don't know. Hunt them down.
So yeah, the real important thing for me as an activator is for the hunters to just understand it doesn't matter what time that late shift or that early shift starts. You still hunt me twice right there at the UTC mark, just like you always did.
Yep.
And we both still get to 2 QSOs. That's the real important. And I think a lot of people was really just losing their mind because they felt like, well, late shift not starting until 10 o'clock, so I can't hunt James again till 10. I like to go to bed at 10. So but with that in store, with the later late shifts, maybe people will hunt me a little bit later. That'll be good for me because, like, normally on Wednesday night I do my live stream and then we do a Patreon after chat, and they end up talking me into going out, and I'm normally out Wednesday night about 12 o'clock at night activating.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So Mike, I'll answer your question. The hunter late shift and early shift are always based on what is late or early at the park you are hunting, not where you as the hunter are located. Okay. So again, part of the nature of the fact that we don't collect logs from hunters, all of our data is driven off of activator logs. So we can't, like, we don't know where you are when the QSO, as a hunter, we don't know where you are because we don't collect a log from you. So like the late shift hunter award is for hunting parks where it's the late shift at the park, and the early shift is for hunting parks where it's the early shift at the park. But yeah,
So-
if you're just curious for your general area, yeah, go look at one of the parks near you, and that would tell you roughly in your neck of the woods where your kind of shift time starts.
So you as a hunter, you can hunt late shift
All day long.
any time of the day.
Yep. Yeah.
As long as you have the antenna and the reach to
do it. Yep.
wherever current late shift is.
If you want to take a long lunch and try to work some VKs for some late shift, yeah, that's you can do it if you're so equipped.
It kind of reminds me of chasing the gray line.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison. And it's funny, I had actually even considered pulling up a gray line map to try to like explain to people, like, the idea was that it's dark where you are when you're doing the activation. So yes. So Larry, that the suggestion to put that kind of late early like identifier in the spotting page did come up, and one of our developers did kind of capture that request and is pretty sure that it's something we can do. So they did add that to our list to potentially do. That way when you're looking at the spotter, you'd know. In the meantime, you can always, right click, open a new tab on the park name, when you're kind of looking at the spotter to see details about the park. So New England states are east of -75, but have the same late shift as states west of -75. I don't know if I follow the question exactly.
Are you in the, well, that's probably goes back to that time zone thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably, so the thing to probably remember is the rounding piece. So it's not 0 degrees to 15 degrees is a 0. We do the offset from 0 and it's rounded. So technically, if you think of the 0 line, 7.5 above and 7.5 below round to 0. And then when you go to the next chunk, 7.5 up to 15 plus 7. You guys are making me do an awful lot of math.
There's no mathing.
Yes, like, you know what I mean. So like,
yes,
those 0, 15, 30, they can really be thought of as kind of like the center of the time block, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Not the boundaries of the time block, because we essentially we calculate the offset and then we round it to the nearest hour. So if you land halfway in between, you'd round up and down. Yes, Mike, that is absolutely the right attitude. Hunt everybody. If they're on the air and you haven't worked them yet, call them. That's the golden rule of Pota. So, yep. Yeah. It's, we realize it's a complex topic. There are some folks that, that I understand had, like, I don't know if saying they got shorted is the right term, but there are some folks who were getting very close to a specific marker in the old definition. And so there are some folks who are kind of like, oh, that sucks. I was just about to hit whatever under the old definition, but I was usually activating at like right after my work day. So most of them don't meet the new definition. So there are some folks that, we acknowledge it might feel like it kind of sets you back a little bit. And we do have some, to not to give away too many details, but we have some brainstorms and ideas for the future to essentially backfill the idea of activity at the beginning of the UTC day. So for a lot of people, late shift had ceased to mean late at night, and it just meant activity when the clock rolls over. So we are brainstorming some ideas around a certificate for something around when the clock rolls over to kind of backfill that void left for people who like liked that vibe. So there's lots of stuff in the works still. You know, at the end of the day, we're going to continue to do new stuff. We have lots of ideas.
How many contacts can you get an hour before and an hour after?
Yep, yeah, and that's actually, it's funny you mentioned it. That's actually exactly along the lines of one of the things that we spitballed was like, hey, is there something we can come up with for like if you get somebody like in the last hour and the first hour, or do we do something based on the first like hour of the day or 3 hours of the day?
This guy,
there's all kinds of stuff.
How about 3 minutes before and 3 minutes after?
3 minutes
contact.
Yeah, that's a constant pile up for this guy.
Yeah. So yeah, there's lots of stuff potentially in the works for the future. You know, understand it's a change. Human nature, we hate when things change. That's my day job. I work in continuous improvement. My job is to convince people that like they want things to change when they really don't. So, you know, I'm familiar with like the anxiety that comes from things changing. But the good news is because things are always changed, it means we're coming up with new ideas. So there'll be a new thing, you know, that comes up in the future. So late shift version 2 starting with 400. Well, so it starts with 100, but when we first turned it on and it basically started spinning to catch up, the 100, the 200, and the 300 probably issued fairly quickly right after each other. And the first time you went and looked, you were already at 400. So essentially it's basically, there are certain triggers, you know, when upload activity happens, that cause the system to go look for awards. So the more active you are, the faster the new awards will catch up because your checks will get triggered more often. So if you're a hunter that makes a lot of contacts and you appear in a lot of activators logs, your numbers will kind of spin up pretty fast, and you might not see some of the interim ones because you might appear in 4 logs in one day, you get your stuff processed 4 times, and all of a sudden you're at 400.
So although I appreciate Brian trying to name an award after me, you also just ruined my dating life in one sentence there. So
here's a question.
Well, 10 a.m. before 10 a.m. through 4 p.m. So those would, you know, again, like speaking in wild generalities, because, you know, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. will generally not be in late shift or early shift. They would just be standard contacts. They'd count towards, you know, essentially all of the other awards and certificates, but they wouldn't count towards either of these new ones, the late or early.
Unless they're contacting activators that are in current late shift.
Good point. Yeah. If you are contacting somebody on the other side of the world where it's the middle of the night, then yeah, you would be getting like a late shift QSO. But yeah, if you're, you know, on 10 meters and contacting somebody down the road where it's just middle of the day for both of you, then it'd just be a standard contact. Yep. And the good news is, so I wrote down a number, so I need an excuse to say it. Where's my camera? I know there's a lot of excitement around the late shift, early shift stuff, some good, some bad, again, change stuff. But the good news is what we're talking about is 4 certificates. So late shift hunter, late shift activator, early shift hunter, early shift activator. We're talking about a change that impacts 4 certificates of the 1,263 different awards that are available to earn as a Pota activator or hunter. So let's keep that in perspective. If the new late shift isn't quite your bag, there's 1,259 other certificates that you can try to go get. So now, of course, some of those are, you know, worked all of Poland or activated all of Germany. So, you know.
Wow, that's a crazy amount of awards.
Yep. So yeah, that's the.
So even though you did, we'll wait on some more questions here to come in, and I'm sure Hayden will pop them up. But even though you did say there was that many awards, you know, I've asked for it multiple times. I know it's in the works. Maybe you can tell me when it's going to pop out. Maybe you can't, but I do know it's in the works because I've been told by a very good source who's in the chat, and he happens to be the boss. I know that the multiple kilo award is coming. I mean, I'm just wanting a 10K award. When's the multiple kilo coming?
I'd have to look at the actual list. The backlog of stuff is, well, I should clarify. The backlog of stuff for me is starting to get shorter as far as like the new awards and stuff we wanted to do. So as far as like the development work, that one's actually getting pretty close. But we have to remember that Jason's wife, like I guess she's a saint. I have no idea. She has to design 1,263 certificates so that the certificates exist to give out. So, logic wise, even though I'm getting close, she's got an awful lot of work to do with designing all of these certificates because, every new country that comes on board needs their equivalent of, how we have a certificate for every state and then we have worked all states. So every new country, she's designing certificates for worked all of Poland and then worked all references in each void ship in Poland. And you know what I mean? So
right.
There's Jason, a lot of certificate designing going on. So
Jason said it'll be endorsement stamps. I just need to endorse Jason. I need my well, it's over 10K now.
Yep. Yeah. The endorsement stamps is the other thing that's coming up on the what I would call the short list, and that's essentially when you look at your awards and you see the column of endorsements that say like, hey, I've done this same thing but all on 20 meters or all CW or whatever. The intent is that you can download a certificate that like has a quote unquote sticker on it that shows that thing. So if you want to print out their certificate that shows, hey, I did this same thing but all in CW, that's also on the short list.
So Kyle had a question that I forgot to that I missed somehow, and I apologize. He wants to know if there's any thought into putting if a park is being activated on the late shift, making that available on the spotting page.
So Kyle, I'm gonna have to say minus 10 points because somebody already asked that.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. That's on the list. I can remember who it was. Somebody in Slack or Facebook or Discord or Twitter or Mastodon, or I don't even remember where. Somebody asked that, and Jeremy jumped in and kind of looked at some stuff, and he said, yeah, I think we can probably do that. So that we do have that on our tickler list. So
I think that I should get an award for saying Kyle's call sign phonetically different every time he contacts me. We got questions popping in everywhere now. Go ahead and keep them coming, Aiden.
Yep.
Well, I'm trying to find the next one.
So yeah, while we wait to see if there's more questions coming through, the stuff that I was talking about, the information for these awards, if you go to parksontheair.com, in the awards section, the information is there about the awards and what the windows are. And if you go to our official docs.pota.app, we did add in the glossary the formal definition with the formula. So if somebody wants to like spot check our math, they can if they want. And in our docs.pota.app, either from the glossary or from the reference materials, you can get to that map that I showed that gives a visual representation. So that map I shared earlier is posted on our website. And then obviously what I would call like the ultimate resource would be take a peek at the actual park page, and that'll give you the definitive answer for that specific park. How can our awards be removed retroactively? So your previous ones aren't removed. If you already earned one of the old awards, it's still there and still in your queue. You can still download it. So yeah, once you get an award, that's in your list. So even if we have one that we change or retire, any that you earned before the change, you still have. So, yep.
Thanks for the super chat, Vern. And we'll give Vance your question now.
I've had. So is Vern asking how the process works to upload your own logs? Is that kind of what he's asking?
Yes, that's exactly what he's asking.
Yeah. So the system does all of the figuring for technically even UTC starts and times. So you don't really have to worry about, other than putting it on your QSO, you don't have to worry about the date and the time and breaking your log up by date or time or late shift or early shift. You just send one log for the park, and the system will figure out which QSOs count which places. So all the QSOs, you set up at 3 p.m. one day and you work that park until 4 a.m. the next morning because you're hardcore. You put all of those in one log and you go to the My Logs section of your profile and drop the file in and hit go, and the system takes care of it for you from there. So hopefully that answers your question, Vern. So I see lots of creative spellings. So it's actually Bailey Sprott. So it's the last names of the folks who hunted a park every day last year. So there's not a formal like award or certificate for that. It's really just more of a PR kind of for fun thing that we were tracking, that Matt shares during the monthly updates, just to see, hey, who are the folks that can actually do this? But it's not an official certificate. It's not an official award. It's just kind of a fun PR thing for people that like that type of stuff. So.
All awards can be sent monetarily through super chats to me tonight. I will go ahead and start accepting them now.
Yeah. Send James $20 and he'll make you any certificate you want. Yes, it is on the list to kind of do different layouts for small screens. They're as some folks have learned, if you're on a really small device, eventually you hit a screen size where there's not really a practical way to show the information that we have on the uploader. So once you get to a certain small size of screen, the system basically just says, hey, sorry, we can't show you the information on your small screen. So for now, it'll just basically say, try turning your device sideways, or, wait till you can use a device with a bigger screen. But it is, again, it's on the list. I'll be honest, it's lower in priority with some of the other stuff that's going on. But it is in the works to do more stuff with the screen size and changing layouts and things.
Here's an update on Vern's question.
Okay, yes. So you can still, if you want, you can still send them to K1 at Parks on the Air, K2 at Parks on the Air, K3, etc. That process will still work. But the kind of the new process that most folks are doing now, and I will just pop my screen up again since I had this website up anyway. Did I share the wrong screen?
Oh, man.
Share and screen 2 and share. All
yeah.
right.
The answer to that last question is yes. You just operate the same way you always have.
Yep. So basically now on the new page, or the new self-uploading, you can just go to My Log Uploads. This is going to be embarrassing. Don't look, guys. You know what we can do, because I can do this. Here we go. We'll pick somebody who's not so sparse in their activity. You as a user would go to your My Log Uploads, and it'll take you to the same spot. But once you click My Log Uploads, you'll see a screen that looks like this. Your screen won't be red. Mine is red because I have admin rights. But from this screen, and again, I have night shift view on, so if the dark colors scare you, don't worry. It'll be white by default unless you tell it to be dark. But it's basically just a file upload box. You can click on it and go pick a file to upload. You can drag a file right over top of the box and drop it in there. When you do that, it'll ask you a couple questions, ask you to click a couple acknowledgement boxes, and then you hit upload. So that's the new like self-uploading process that you can do. It's really straightforward once you've done it a couple times. If you have issues with a log after you've uploaded it, you can look at your history of uploaded logs. You can click your drop down button. And again, I have some options here that, a normal user wouldn't see. But if you realize you made a mistake with this log, you can click this request support button, and that'll ping the support team. And you can basically tell them like, hey, I made a mistake. Can you back this log out? Or, let them know what your problem is, and they'll get you squared away. So that's like the 30-second overview. If you go to docs.pota.app, in the video resources section, Matt N3NWV that most of you know, he's actually done some more in-depth kind of video overviews of how to use the that new uploader. So Curtis, yeah, the answer is yes. One of the I think the person that was on with you last week, James, the
friend of the channel,
other James, yep, VE3. I still want to say N6 NRD, but VE3 JLN, one of our volunteers, he's working on some kind of new mapping stuff that would do all kinds of stuff. He's playing around with a lot of different things, and as he does that, he drops us like little like snippets of what he's built. He says, "Hey, what do you guys think of this? What do you think of that?" But yeah, the idea is to do some like pin color coding based on certain criteria and a whole host of other things. We'd also like to play around with like the map tiler we use so that we can show topographic maps and all kinds of other stuff too. So there's a whole bunch of stuff kind of in the wish list that he's basically sorting through to figure out what can we do and things like that. So
I can tell you the map that he's worked on is absolutely amazing because I'm beta testing that thing, and it is just phenomenal. Because when you've activated like all the parks around you, and you're looking for little clusters that you can go, just 3+ hours away anyway, you want to find the best you can, and to be able to pull up the map and say, okay, this is what I have activated here, this is what I haven't. It's just. When they get that going, it'll be great, guys. Thanks very much for the super chat, Robbie and Eddie. I appreciate it.
Let me get those up before we go to the next question. There's Eddie. Thank you, Eddie. And there's Robert. These guys crack me up every week.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next question.
Becoming youth stats category. So I'll give a pretty direct answer to that. Probably no. Because that would require us to collect personally identifiable information, i.e. somebody's age, and Pota has made a deliberate decision to never collect stuff that would be considered personally identifiable information because that just gets wildly complex with regulations and things like that. So while it's a cool idea, we don't really plan on doing any awards that would require us to collect like personal information about our users. That's kind of off the table unless people give us hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire a team of lawyers to make sure we don't screw up. So yeah, thanks for the vote of confidence, Ed. Yeah, that's something we luckily from like day one, we had one of our volunteers involved who does security stuff as his day job. So he's always been kind of our like, guiding light for like, hey, would this cross any boundaries? And so luckily we have somebody on that knows that stuff because I honestly don't. So he's it's been awesome having Tom as part of the team who knows that stuff. So
All righty.
Where did it go?
Any more questions so we can get Vance out of here at a decent hour? Maybe
Phil wants to know who the top club activator was for the Autumn Support Your Park weekend, but I'm sure you've got that covered, and that'll be out soon.
Yeah, that's probably not even.
I actually don't. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be. I'd have to check with Matt because Matt's doing kind of like the PR and the monthly updates and stuff now. So I'm assuming Matt will probably stick that information in the monthly update.
Okay.
I don't know. Usually, see, this is October. It just happened. Yeah. Usually we wait several weeks before we share that anyway. Like I could look at our dashboard right now and see who's in theory the top of that pile. But if there's folks that haven't uploaded their logs yet, since it was just within the last couple of weeks, we usually, that's why we usually do those. We usually wait a week or two after the month ends before we share stuff from the month before. That way everybody has time to get their logs and stuff in. So.
Cool.
All right, guys. Any more questions?
Vern had one last question. This is important to me.
Yeah, donations. We're strictly donation based. So if you go to parksontheair.com, there is a donation button. And there's, again, I'm not super involved in the financial side, but I think you can do PayPal donations. I think we're technically even set up on like Venmo and some of like the cool hip kid stuff. You can.
I heard something today. There's something called Amazon Smiles.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you're familiar with Amazon Smile, if instead of going to Amazon.com, you go to smile.amazon.com, everything you buy on Amazon, a percentage will go to like the charity of your choice. So Parks on the Air is in that program. So if you go to smile.amazon.com and make Parks on the Air your beneficiary, everything you buy on Amazon, Parks on the Air gets like a 0.003 of a cent for every $8 billion bought.
And it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, it doesn't cost. Yeah,
it doesn't cost you any more or any less. We need to do a video on how to do that.
Yeah, the Smile is great. The other thing that you can do is through your workplace. We are part of a lot of the programs like like Benevity, and there's some other like charity organizations that corporations partner with. So if your like my company does, I think it's called Benevity. So any donations I make to Parks on the Air, my company matches. Because I'm a Parks on the Air volunteer, my company actually pays Parks on the Air $10 an hour for all of my volunteer hours, up to a cap each year. So some of our volunteers have programs like that through their employer, where their employers actually make a donation to the company you volunteer or the organization you volunteer for. So it's all stuff like that. There's, we don't have any like commercial interests. It's all just individuals doing donations via, there we go. Jason's got it up. Google Pay, Venmo, Apple Pay, PayPal. Technically, I think you can even mail a check to Jason's house and he will go deposit it in the bank. So, yep.
If it's bank to bank, do they still have to say their call sign, Jason?
Bank to bank, keeps it up.
All right. If there's no more, we're gonna wrap it up, guys, because I still got an after hour chat with the Patreons. First off, I want to go ahead and say thanks to Vance very much, and thanks for Jason being in the chat. My email will appreciate you guys this week, because there's everything I know. It came straight from their mouths, and I'll tell you, I get a lot of emails a week, and about some of the craziest stuff. Most of them is hunters. Hey, I don't remember what time we did, and I'm trying to log you on QRZ, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll get like the 30 of you tonight, But anytime I can relax my emails a little bit, I love to do it. So I appreciate you coming on. And I did notice that Beetlejuice showed up. We talked about James Minden, and he shows up. And
there he is.
All right. So other than that, Vance, anything special coming up for Pota that we need to know about?
So there's a whole bunch of like exciting top secret stuff in the works that I can't share yet. So I'll just leave it at that. We have some exciting stuff that Jason is doing because of how large the community is getting, to do some more formalized ways to get feedback from the community on stuff like our awards. I'm pulling together some folks to help with some ideas we've got around plaque event for next year. So there's all kinds of stuff that we're scheming and thinking about based on all the user feedback we've gotten. Pretty much everything we do, we get piles of feedback. Most of it is presented in a friendly fashion, and so we do kind of take it and consider it. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that we've got in the works that we'll start announcing over the next several months as we can. So
good deal. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Everybody, Patreons, we will be doing after chat. Vance, you're welcome to come over to that if you want. Just let me know after the stream, and we'll get you set up over there.
Well, I've actually got the official one of the official Pota admin meetings tonight, so I'm jumping from here to the Pota volunteer team. So
all right, well we will let you head out then and do that. We appreciate you, and thanks Jason for being in the chat as well. Thanks everybody. I hope we got all your questions answered tonight, and you guys can go back to emailing me about, hey, why aren't you in 17 parks today? You're only in 16.
nice.
I love my hunters. They're amazing people. They care about my well-being. Let me tell you. Even people on the Pota admin team has messaged me when I only did one activation on Sunday because of my sinus infection. I got an email. Are you okay? All right, thanks guys. We appreciate it. I'll catch everybody in the after chat, and thanks to everybody for the donations tonight. 73, everybody.
73, everyone.